Hey everyone, welcome to part 7 of the Pokemon game series in Unity. So in this video, we will create the UI of our battle system and we load the Pokemons that we created into the battle system. So if you like the series so far, please consider subscribing to this channel. That'll really help me a lot. So let's start. Okay, so first I'm going to create a game object called battle system. So our battle system will have its own camera. So under the battle system, I'll add a new camera. I'll name this battle camera. So to start a battle, all we have to do is switch from the main camera to the battle camera. So next I'll create a canvas under the battle system. So this canvas will hold all the UI of the battle system and I'll name this battle canvas. I'll change the render mode to screen space camera, and for the render camera I will choose my battle camera. And under the canvas scaler, I will change the UI scale mode to scale with screen size. So our UI will look same on different screen sizes. Now in the battle camera, I'll change the projection to orthographic. So now the size of the camera and the canvas will be same. So let's just drag the battle system object outside the tile map to somewhere we can see. So now I'll create a background image for the canvas. So onto the canvas, I'll add an image. I'll rename this to background. And we need to import the image that we'll set here. So let me do that. Inside art, I'll create a new folder called battle. And I'll import all the assets. So here we have lots of images that we can use for the background of our battle system. So I'll just change the sprite mode to multiple. I'll leave the pixel per unit at 100. I'll change the filter mode to point no filter and hit apply. Okay, so now if we open it in the sprite editor, we need to split this image into multiple images, just like we did with the other sprites. So I'll click on split, and for type, I'll choose grid by cell count because I know there are 3 columns and 4 rows. So for the column, I'll choose 3, and for the row, I'll choose 4 and click on slice. Okay, so now this is sliced into multiple sprites. So this is the sprite that I want to use, but I don't want this black outline that each of these sprite has. So in order to remove that, click on this blue dot and you can reduce the size of the sprite. Okay, so just make sure that you don't include any border. Hit apply. And now for the image of our background, I will set the sprite. Click on set native size. This will make the image the original size of our background. So now I'll drag this to one corner of the canvas and select the rect tool. Click on shift and resize the image to resize it without messing up the aspect ratio. So next we'll create a dialog box over here. So in the art, you can see that we have a sprite for our dialog box and we have one for our HUD too. So I'll select both of them, change the pixel per unit to 32, filter to point no filter, compression to none, and hit apply. Okay, so next I'll create an image for the dialog box. So let me just resize the image. And for the image, I will use our dialog sprite. So you can see that our dialog box is really stretched and it looks really weird. In order to fix this, we can set the borders of the dialog sprite. So in the sprite editor, you can see these green dots. Just drag them inside like this. So what this will do is this will tell Unity, don't scale anything that is outside this box. So all these borders and all are outside this box right now. So Unity won't scale any of those. Only what's inside the box will be scaled. I'll hit apply and we just have to set the image again. And now you can see that our dialog box looks good. Now inside the dialog box, we need a text to display the dialog. So I'll create a text. Let me just resize this. Okay, I'll leave some space for our action selector. For the font, I'll choose this font that we imported. I'll set the font size to 40 and let me just change the text. So next, under the dialog box, I'll create a game object for our action selector. Let me just resize this. And inside that, I need to add text for two actions, fight and run. So I'll just copy this dialog text and paste it under the action selector. I'll just rename it to fight text. Change the text to fight and I'll resize it. Okay, you have to make sure that it is under the action selector. Just drag that into the action selector game object. Okay, again, I'll just resize this and set the alignment to center. So I'll duplicate this and create another text for the run action. And just reposition it. Alright, so that looks good to me. So you can just disable the main camera and in the game window we can set the size to standalone and you can see the UI of a battle system properly. Okay, so now I'll create an image for the Pokemon. So under the canvas, I'll add a new image. I'll name this player unit. So this image will be for the Pokemons of the player. I'll resize it to 200 by 200. And for the sprite, let's just choose some Pokemon so that we get a reference. So I can just drag this and place it here. So in the hierarchy, you have to make sure that the dialog box is below the player unit so that it appears in front of it. So next we'll add a HUD that will display the name, level and HP of the player Pokemon. So this is the sprite we are going to use for our HUD. I'll just set the borders so that we don't get any weird stretching. And under the battle canvas, I'll add a new image called player HUD. I'll set the sprite as image, and I'll select the rect tool and resize this. Okay, so this looks okay to me. So under the HUD, I'll create a text to display the name of the Pokemon. Actually, I'll just duplicate this fight text so that I won't have to set the fonts and all that again. So I'll just duplicate it, drag it into the player HUD, and I'll rename this to name text. I'll change the text to name and just drag it onto a HUD. I'll set the alignment to left so that we have some space for a long name. Okay, so that looks good, but we will have a problem here. So as we create our UI, we will have to resize this HUD. Okay, so if I try resizing this, you can see that everything will get messed up, right? So to fix that, we can set anchors to the elements inside the HUD box. So select the name text and change the anchor to left and middle. So this one. So now if we resize our HUD, the name will always stay towards the left end of our HUD. Okay, so now I'll just duplicate the name text and create a text for the level. I'll just change the text and change its position. So I'll set its anchor to right middle so that it will stay on the right side when we scale our HUD. So next we need to create an HP bar that will show the health of the Pokemon. So under the player HUD, I will create a new image called HP bar. I'll set the width to something like 220 and the height to something like 18. I'll just change the color to something like black, and I'll set the anchor to stretch horizontal so that if we change the size of the HUD, the size of the HP bar will also change. So inside the HP bar, I need to create a background for the health. So I'll duplicate the HP bar and change its name to background. I'll change the color to white and I'll just reduce its size a little. I'll make this a child object of the HP bar and I'll duplicate the background to create an image that will show the health. So I'll rename this to health and I'll just change the color. So if we change the scale of the health, you can see that the size changes from both sides. So in order for it to look like an HP bar, we only want the size to reduce from the right side. So for that, we can change the X pivot to 0. So now the pivot icon is at the right side, and if we change the scale, it will reduce from the right side, just like an HP bar. So all we have to do is normalize the current HP of the Pokemon and set that as the scale. And finally, I'll just duplicate this text. I'll call this HP text. Change the text to HP. Make the font size 18. Change the color. And I'll place it here. And I'll make this a child object of the HP bar. and I'll set the anchor to left. Okay, so we have the basic UI we need. So let's start writing the scripts that we'll use in our battle system. So inside the scripts folder, I'll create another folder called battle. And first I'll create a script for the HP bar. Open that in Visual Studio. So in the HP bar, first we need a reference to the image that is showing the health. So let's test this by setting the health to 50% in the start function. So to set the health to 50%, I just have to change its scale to 0.5. Okay, so I changed the X scale to 0.5. So let's assign the script to the HP bar, and let's assign the health image to the script. Okay, so now if you run the game, you can see that our health is at 50%, just like we set. So in the script, instead of setting this from start, I will create a public function called setHP, and this will take a float called HP normalized, and we'll just set that as the scale. So let's just remove the start function. So next, let's create a script for the HUD. I'll call it battle HUD. So in the battle HUD script, we need a reference to the name text, level text, and the HP bar. So we don't have a class called text. So when we're working with UI, we need to import unityengine.ui namespace. So let's do that. Okay, so now we have a class called text. Okay, so we have a reference for the name text. Next, I'll create one for the level text. And finally, we need one for the HP bar. So here I'll create a public function to set values to all these three. So this function will take a Pokemon class. So to the name text, I'll set Pokemon.name. So the name is inside the base, but we don't have access to the base. So let's go inside the Pokemon class, and we can see that the base and level are private variables. So we can make this a property so that we have access to it outside this class. Change it to a property by adding a getter and setter, and do the same for level. Okay, so now we can access these properties outside the class. But remember, I told you that it's a good practice to capitalize the first letter of the property name. So here's a pro tip. To rename a variable, you can right click on it and select rename, type the name you want. So you can see that this changes the name of the variable in all the places where we used it. Okay, so let's change the name of the level to. And while we are here, let's fix a mistake that I made in the Pokemon class. So I set the HP to base.max HP, but the current HP should be set to the actual max HP when creating a Pokemon. So let's change that. Okay, so In our battle HUD script, we will have access to the base, and we can access the name inside the base. So make sure to choose the name with capital N because that is our property. So next I'll set value for the level text. So we can get the level from Pokemon.level, the property that we just changed right now. And for the HP bar, we can use the set HP function that we just created now. Okay, so we need to normalize the current HP of the Pokemon. So we can do that by dividing the HP of the Pokemon by the max HP. And make sure to convert it into float since both HP and max HP are integers. And for the scale, we need float. So now we can assign the battle HUD script to the player HUD. Okay, so let's assign the name, level, and HP bar. So next we need a script for our player unit. So I'll create a script called battle unit. So in this script, we need a reference to the Pokemon base and the level. So for testing the battle system, we will set these values from the inspector, but later on, we will set these dynamically when we start a battle. So next, let's create a public function that will create a Pokemon from the base and level. I'll call this function setup. So here we need to create a Pokemon. We can do this by calling the constructor of the Pokemon class. For the first parameter, we will pass the base and level for the second. Okay, so let's create a property to store the Pokemon we created. And finally, we need to set the image of the player unit with the sprite of the Pokemon. So for that, first we need to know if this is a player's Pokemon or enemy Pokemon. So we'll create a Boolean variable for that. And if it's a player Pokemon, set the image to the back sprite of the Pokemon. Okay, so here we need to import Unity Engine.UI namespace. And let's set the sprite to Pokemon.base.backsprite. Okay, otherwise we will set the front sprite. So let's assign the script to the player unit. For the Pokemon, I will choose Charmander and let's set the level as 7. And this is a player unit, so I will select this checkbox. Okay, so next we'll create a script called battle system that will control the entire battle. So in the battle system script, we need reference to both battle unit and battle HUD script. I'll call this player unit and I'll create a variable called player HUD. So in the start, we will call a function to set up the battle. So let's create that function. So in this function, first we need to set up the player unit and then set data for the player HUD. So I'll call player unit dot setup, which will create the player Pokemon. Then I'll call player HUD dot set data. So we have to pass a Pokemon. So I'll pass player unit dot Pokemon, the one we created during the setup. Okay, so this is a property, but I forgot to capitalize the first letter. So let's just rename that. Okay, so you can see that in the battle system, it will automatically change the name of the property. So now let's assign the battle system script to our battle system object, and let's assign the player unit and player HUD variables. So now if we play the game, we should be able to load the data of the Pokemon. Okay, so you can see that all the data has been loaded successfully. The sprite of the Pokemon changed, the name and the level also changed. The HP was also set, but we don't see a difference because since at the start the HP is going to be full. So next let's duplicate the player unit and create an enemy unit. I'll change the Pokemon to Bulbasaur. I'll change the level to 5 and deselect its player unit since this is an enemy unit. For the sprite, let's select Bulbasaur front sprite and let's place it here. Okay, so let's duplicate the player HUD to create enemy HUD, and I'll place it over here. So now in our battle system, we need a reference to the enemy unit and the enemy HUD. And we'll also set up those, and we'll set data for the enemy HUD. Okay, so we need to assign those in the battle system script. Okay, so now if we test the game, you can see that the data of the player Pokemon and the enemy Pokemon was loaded successfully. Okay, so I'll stop the video here and we'll continue working on our battle system in the next video. So if you like this series, please consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like on the video. That will really help me a lot. So I'll see you in the next video.